just go through the monologue. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. As most of you know, this is probably one of the best time to be alive as humans. There has never been time in human history where there is a confluence of technologies that is coming together, that is allowing each one of us and a small group of people to do the things that was only done by the superpowers before. Whether it is going to space is no longer needed a superpower or a country or resources of a country to actually go to space. It is now being done by entrepreneurs and individuals and small companies. And same type of things you're going to start seeing in every industry. So if you start to think about that, as the sensors are becoming smaller, cheaper, faster, and more powerful, you're starting to see a fundamental change in how we look at healthcare. So healthcare is going to be completely disrupted by the fact that we're going to be able to understand what's happening inside the human body at all times, and to be able to use, in fact, food as a medicine to be able to prevent and reverse chronic diseases. My fundamental belief is in the next 10 years, we as humanity will probably eliminate not just the infectious diseases, but the ideas of people dying from chronic diseases such as diabetes, Alzheimer, Parkinson's, cancers, dementia, all these diseases, or depression, anxiety, autoimmune diseases. These are the diseases that happen by the bad choices we make, not because we're born with the bad genes. Less than 10% of all diseases have anything to do with our genes or our DNA. Everything that we develop actually is because of our lifestyle. Because sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly, we're eating foods that actually is harming our body. So one of the interesting things is I started a company called Viome, and the idea of Viome was that what if we can understand what's happening inside every person's body? And once we know that, can we tell them what foods they should be eating and why, what foods they should be avoiding and why? And this idea of there is some universal, magically healthy food. And we all have been made to believe that if we eat green foods like spinach, or broccoli, or green beans, or eat lentils and legumes, these are healthy food. And what most people don't realize is the same food that can be healthy for you today may be unhealthy for you a year from now. Or if it's healthy for someone you know, doesn't mean it's going to be healthy for you. Like for me, when I actually did the Viome test for myself, and what it turns out was that my body was having a very difficult time with sulfide. So I had a very high sulfide production that was actually causing inflammation in my gut. And it told me to avoid foods such as cabbage, Brussels sprout, broccoli, and spinach, because spinach has a lot of oxalic acid or oxalate that was actually not being digested in my body, and that was going to turn out is going to become a kidney stone. Same type of thing, that I was eating lots of lentils and legumes, and that protein was not being digested by my body, and it was going into the colon where it was being fermented, producing ammonia, and that was actually causing a whole bunch of inflammation. And as I started to adjust my diet, not only I lost 20 pounds, what's the best part is I feel more energetic. I have now no longer the bloating and the gas in the stomach, and all that thing just went away. And what I'm trying to tell you is that people have this idea of that these foods are healthy. Well, they may be healthy for someone at some point of time, but not healthy always. Other things we realized was a lot of the times you just can't get enough nutrition from the food, because you have to eat so much of that food just to get a tiny bit of nutrient. So we decided, what if we can give each person the nutrient the body needs in the form of capsules? And what if we can make those capsules on demand for every individual? So when you analyze the body, we are able to tell you that you need 22 milligram of curcumin, you need 7 milligram of elderberries, you need 17 milligram of amylase, and whatever the ingredients you need, the food extracts, vitamins, minerals, herbs, digestive enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics, we actually put them in the capsules for each individual using the robotics factory and ship them off to you. Now, the reason I mention all this about Viome is people thought the healthcare problem could never be solved. because people thought being sick is something that happens as we get older. And what we realized was that it is not something that has to happen. It happens because we stop taking care of our body. Now, I'm going to switch from the Wyoming now to just as a part of being an entrepreneur and what I learned from this journey as an entrepreneur. That every time when you start a project, you have to ask yourself a question, that what if this project is actually successful? Would it help a billion people, 100 million people live a better life? And the reason you need to be asking that question is, once you know that you can create a product that is going to improve the lives of people, you can create a massively big, successful enterprise. So if you can find a way to help a billion people live a successful life, guess what happens? You're going to create $100 billion company as a byproduct of it. But if you set out to create $100 billion company, you're very likely to fail, because you only, in a long term, the only way to create a sustainable growth is to actually make people's life better. The second question you have to ask yourself when you start a project is the time now, or was the time 5 years ago? And the reason you have to ask yourself is, what had changed in the last couple of years? And more importantly, what do you expect to change in the next 3 to 5 years that will allow you to solve this problem today than it was possible a decade ago? And the reason is, technology is moving so fast. If you're still using the technologies of the past to solve the today's problem, by the time you actually get to the market, you already become obsolete. That means you have to be looking out to see what is coming, not what has already happened, and how would you intercept those technologies that are coming together. And that is what is going to allow you to actually stay ahead of the game. And the last question you have to ask yourself is, what questions am I asking that are different from what everyone else in the industry is asking? Because the questions you ask is the problem you solve. And that means if everyone is asking exactly the same question you are asking, that means you're solving exactly the same problem in the same way that everyone else is solving. And maybe you can do it 10% better than someone else. Maybe you can do it 15% better than someone else, but you'll never be able to do it 10 times better than someone else or 100 times better than someone else unless you're asking a different question. And I can apply that to almost every industry that I have been on. This is my 7th venture at Wyoming, and every venture that I have done is in a completely different industry. And the reason I go from industry to industry is because once you become good at something, you actually become useless. That means you become an incrementalist. You can never look at the foundation of what experts have taken it for granted. You can never challenge that. And that means you can only make it slightly better, but you can't be disruptively better unless you're coming from outside the industry looking in. Now, if you think about it as an entrepreneur, the reason that it stops us from going out and taking a moonshot or doing some audacious thing, because we're constantly worried about this failure. We always worry, what if it doesn't work? What if we fail? What will they think? And I have no idea who they are, but we all worries about what will they think, right? And that is the fundamental problem. If you're doing something for someone else, if you're doing something because you're worried what someone else will think, you are always looking outside. You're not looking to see what is your conviction. What do you believe in? What are you willing to die for? I mean, because to me, an entrepreneur succeeds when they have a true obsession to solve a problem. That means a lot of people have this idea of that you have to be passionate about something. To me, the passion is for hobbies. Passion is for losers. The true entrepreneurs have obsession. They go to sleep thinking about it. They jump out of the bed every single morning thinking about it. And that is the trick. That means every single morning, if you're not jumping out of the bed, whatever you're doing is not worth doing. That means you should go out and do completely different thing if it doesn't excite you enough to be jumping out of the bed every single morning. Now, as a life of an entrepreneur, you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to always find things that things are going really well and the times things are not going to go well. And the way to look at this is that life of an entrepreneur is like your heartbeat. It goes up and down and up and down. And that tells you you're alive, because when the line is smooth, you're dead. And there are so many people we know, they want to live a smooth life. That is a life, living a life of a dead person, right? If you want to live a smooth life, you may as well be dead, because there is nothing about you that is worth living, right? The ups and downs tells you that things are actually happening and you're alive. When you are down, all you have to do is hunker down and know the next beat is going to be up. When you're on top of that beat, never become too cocky, because remember, the winter is coming and winter will come. And that is a point. That means every time when you believe you're wildly successful, don't forget your friends. Don't forget that the things that takes you up also can bring you down. And when the things are down, just hunker down and stay close to the friends, and the things are going to be up. The interesting thing is, we actually always wonder, we're going to have self-doubt. We're going to always wonder, are we capable of doing what we are about to be doing? Yeah, and this self-doubt is okay, but what's not okay is not to take the action. Now, going back, in the Western philosophy, we have been told to always look at the goals and look at the outcomes, and you're always told to focus on the ball and always look at the outcomes. What I realized coming from India was that it's really, outcome is not something we can ever control. That destiny is not something we control, but we do control is our action. That means every single day we need to say, what can I do today, right now, that is going to be towards my purpose, towards my goal in life. That means all I do is constantly are taking action every single time to move towards the goal. And it is what it is, and it will be what will be. And that is the mantra of life you have to live with. That means I look at every time I am faced with a problem, and I define that problem to be only two types of problems: things that are in my control and the things that are out of my control. When things are out of my control, I simply say, look, it is what it is, and it will be what will be. And when the things are in my control, I know that all I can do is give it my best effort, do everything I can every single minute of my waking life. And it is what it is, and it will be what will be. And that allows you to live a life of happiness, a purpose, and without stress. Now, so that concept, once you realize, the second thing you have to see is that every time something happens, we have this tendency to label that event, right? Is it good or is it bad? And literally, just by simply labeling something good or bad, our mind changes, our emotions changes, how we react to it changes, right? So when something happens and we think it is bad, we start to feel bad, we start to feel depressed, we start to feel, oh my God, my life is coming to an end. And when we label something as good, we say, oh my God, look, I'm in the top of the world. And the same event that you think is bad today, and you look back 10 years from now, you're going to think that was the best thing that ever happened. That means that what is happening today, whether it is good or bad, may not be determined for many, many years. And I can give you this story that I used to hear from my mom and dad all the time, right? There was this villager, and who was in this village, he had one young son, and he was so proud of him, and he knew that as this young man is going to grow up, he's going to be helping him with the farm, he's going to be helping him in his old age. And one day his young son got stepped by a horse on his foot, and his foot broke, and he could not walk properly anymore. And everyone in the village said, oh my God, you are the unluckiest fellow, you are the most unfortunate fellow in the world, because you only had one son who even he can't walk properly. What will happen to you? Guess what happened? A year later, there was a war, and the draft happened, and all the soldiers came to the village and said, every single young person who can walk properly is going to the war. And the only person who was left behind was this person's son. Now imagine what happened. Every villager now came to him and said, you are the luckiest person on earth that you still have your son with you. And we all have lost our able sons, right? My point is that thing that looked bad, actually turned out to be good. And that is the lesson you have to learn, is that things on the surface may look bad or good today, but what happens 10 years from now, 5 years from now, may actually turn out to be completely different. Now, look at today's world of pandemic that we live in. We think the COVID was probably the worst thing that could have possibly happened to the humanity. And now I don't want to take it lightly. We lost millions of great human beings to this pandemic, and we should never take it lightly. But I can tell you that a decade from now, when we look back at the history, the COVID will turn out to be one of the best things that could have ever happened to humanity. And here is why. It advanced our healthcare at least by a decade. We would not have telehealth as a part of our life as pandemic made it to be. That means today the doctors feel comfortable coming on the Zoom or actually having a visit, virtual visit to the patient that they never thought they will ever do. Look at it. We as humanity, we started to take control of our own health. When the pandemic happened, it's not like I do what I do. When I get sick, I go to the hospital. Pandemic taught us that, you know what, I don't want to be sick, I don't want to go to the hospital. People start to eat healthy, people start to take supplements to boost their own immune system, and they realize their actions have health consequences. That means when they go out and do things that are not good, suddenly they get sick. Or for example, in this pandemic, did you realize there was no flu this year? There was no cold this year because people were wearing masks, people were taking precautions, people were washing their hands. And suddenly we realized the flu, the whole season of flu is completely disappeared. There was no flu, there was no cold, and people were healthier during pandemic than they have ever been. More people are today more fit and healthier because they're taking control of their own health. And to me, education system is going to be completely changed because of pandemic. I know, like in New York, the college union, the teachers union would have never allowed a teacher to teach remotely, right? Now, today during pandemic, every school system started to implement the virtual learning. And now imagine, as opposed to being at a school only taught by the teachers who happen to be at that school, what if you can get the best teacher in that subject from around the world teaching you about that subject? That means now the resources of the world can be at your command. Everyone who is best at something can actually teach you the things virtually that was never happened. So I think when we look back at this COVID, it may turn out to be a great event. And COVID has changed a lot. Like the fact that we're here today having this conversation and a virtual event, if you go back and look at 5 years ago, people thought these virtual events are people who cannot have real events. And people thought the purpose of the event was to really travel to an event and people come together and mix together. You can never have an event that could be virtual. People can actually ask questions of each other. People can meet each other. And I think what's happening is these virtual events are allowing everyone around the world to be able to come together irrespective of where they are physically. Now, the fact is almost impossible for me to have traveled today to be able to speak with you. And because of these virtual events, you and I are able to share the ideas. You and I are able to actually answer each other's questions. You and I are able to meet with each other and actually communicate. And to me, that is what so if there is one message you have to realize from this talk is that what you do matters. An event that looks bad may actually turn out to be a great event. So always look at what is you can do when things happen at that time. What actions can you take to make other people's lives better? Because every single thing you do, the more you focus on other people's making lives better, guess ultimately not only it comes back to you, but it also allows you to create an amazingly long-term sustainable business. So don't look at the world what is, look at the world what it can be, and find a way for you to be able to create the world that you can imagine. There is absolutely nothing that you can't achieve if you put your mind to it. All it takes is set of innovation and a spirit of entrepreneurship that can not only solve the humanity's grand challenges, whether it is education, whether it is lack of food, whether it's lack of energy, or whether it is lack of fresh water, or is lack of land. Our mindset of scarcity limits us to what we can achieve. Our imagination can get past our belief system. Right? Even today, the people who love us the most, what would they tell you? They will tell you that you can go out and do anything. Sky is the limit. Now, remember what they just said. Your limit is the sky. Without realizing, sky doesn't exist. Sky is nothing but a figment of our imagination. When you go from here to the moon, you don't say, hey, mom, I just passed the sky. There is no sky. We create these sky with our own belief system that there is this boundary that cannot be crossed. And we create these virtual skies every single time in our path. And these hurdles are imaginary hurdles unless you go there and you find there is absolutely nothing that was actually stopping you other than your mindset. And this mindset actually tells somehow limits you to what you can achieve. So like today, people say that there is a limited amount of land we can live on because planet Earth is the only place we can live. Why is that? There is no reason we couldn't live on the moon, Mars, or beyond. And people say, well, you can't because there is, how are you going to grow the food? Well, the point is, why do you have to grow the food? You have to ask yourself, why do you eat food? Instead of asking how to grow the food, is ask, why do we eat food? And when you ask that question, suddenly you realize the only reason we eat food is because we need energy and we need nutrition. And then you say, wait a sec, plants get energy from photosynthesis. Many bacteria get energy from radiation. Can we take the genetic material from bacteria or plant and we can now use CRISPR to modify our own body, and suddenly we can get energy from radiation or from photosynthesis or many other ways. And if nutrition is what we need, what do we need? We need hydrogen, we need oxygen. What if we can find water? Wouldn't the water give us H2O and we can have both hydrogen and oxygen? My point I'm trying to make is that the things that look impossible because we keep asking the same question, by simply changing the question, it allows you to look at the world of possibilities. And to me, that is the key to living life, is to live a life of possibilities. It's not about being the glass being half empty or half full. It's not about being pessimist or optimistic. It is about knowing what is it that you care about. To me, I never look at the glass being half empty or half full. I look at, is this glass worth filling? If this glass is worth filling, why do I care it is half empty? Because I can fill it. Why do I care if it is half full? I'm going to fill it. If this glass is not worth filling, then I don't really care if it is half empty or half full. So to me, it is about, what do I want the world to be? And I go out and focus on creating that world. And that's the only way you can push the humanity forward. When you wake up in the morning and you know the actions you take every day, it actually impacts the world, it impacts your family, and it impacts the society, and it impacts the humanity. So my last words will be, dream as big as you possibly can. Dream so big that people think you're absolutely crazy. And never be afraid to fail, because you only fail when you give up. Everything else is simply a learning experience or a stepping stone to different ideas and bigger ideas. So with that, Krishna, I'm ready for questions and answers.
Thank you so much for these words. So can we proceed towards question answer session now?
Yes.
So the first question is what was your inspiration behind Biome?
Well, the inspiration was very simple, that I lost my dad to cancer. And to me, it was, why, how did he develop cancer? Why did he have to develop cancer? And the more I start to read about it, it turns out that a lot of the things that we eat, our gut microbiome, is actually not only responsible for progression of cancer, it also is responsible whether the therapy for cancer is going to work or not work. In fact, if you Google, there was a very interesting research that came out about a month ago, that they had a bunch of patients that they did the immunotherapy for cancer and it didn't work for those patients. And they simply changed the gut microbiome, and the same people responded to exactly the same therapy. They started working. They took the people who were addicted to alcohol and they simply changed their gut microbiome, and their addiction to alcohol went away. And now we are seeing exactly the same things on depression. We are seeing the same thing on anxiety. We're seeing it for acne and eczema. We are seeing the same thing on obesity and diabetes, just by actually finding out what their gut microbes are producing, not what gut microbes are, but what they are actually producing. And that is the key. Everyone, when I started the company in the industry, was asking two questions, and both of them, in my opinion, were wrong questions. Right? They were looking at your DNA, thinking somehow there is magical once you figure out what your DNAs are. It occurred to me that your DNA never changes. That means when you become 400 pounds heavier, your DNA doesn't change. When you develop diabetes, your DNA doesn't change. When you develop depression, your DNA doesn't change. So how can we look at DNA and tell you, are you moving towards a disease or moving away from a disease? And we realize your genes don't change, but your gene expression is always changing. What if we can measure gene expression? We will know, are you moving towards a disease or moving away from a disease, and how can we intercept it? The second thing was, when people start talk about gut microbiome, they were focusing on what microbes exist in your gut. And we say that's the wrong question, because human body doesn't have eyes and ears. It doesn't say, I see bacteroides there. It cares about what they are producing. And I thought if we can actually understand what these microbes are producing, we'll be able to actually solve the problem of the diseases. 4 years later, now we can actually show, when we give people the recommendations of our diet and supplements, in 4 months, we see their IBS symptoms, their depression symptoms, or anxiety symptoms reduced by more than 30% in 4 months. And we saw the same thing with diabetes. The risk goes down by 30% in 4 months, right? Now we're starting to see that literally every single disease, we are developing now vaccine for colorectal cancer. We're developing a vaccine for autoimmune diseases. And sooner or later, we'll be able to understand all the different diseases, what is causing them, use the food as a medicine, use the nutrition as a medicine to be able to prevent it from happening. And if the person has already developed a disease, then we should be able to intercept them using vaccine or phages or some type of IgA to be able to actually reverse the diseases. So my hope really is, in the next decade, our children and grandchildren will never have to live with chronic diseases.
Yes, sir. The next question is, can you brief us about your award-winning book, Moonshots?
Well, the moonshot is really about the mindset, about how do you rethink about this idea of that things are scarce versus things are abundant. Because scarcity brings us to a point where you normally would think that if someone else wins, you will lose, because there is a finite amount of things that are in the society. There is a finite amount of resources. And if someone else takes it, then you won't have it. And this book is all about abundance, right? So we have this idea that we believe the human beings are greedy. It doesn't matter how much we have, we would want more of it. Without realizing, actually, the human beings are not greedy. Once we come internally to the conclusion that things in fact are abundant, we don't fight over it. And one thing we all have agreed on, there is abundance of air and abundance of oxygen in the atmosphere. Guess what happens? We can go and watch a cricket game. 50,000 of us can watch a cricket game sitting next to each other, and we never slap the person next to us and say, hey, you just took a deep breath. You just took my oxygen. Stop breathing. Because we believe we can all breathe as much as we want. There is so much air and there is so much oxygen. And we don't ever worry about who is breathing deeply, who is breathing shallow, who is next to us breathing and who is not breathing. Because you know why? Because we believe inherently that air is in abundance. Now imagine the same thing with energy. We fight over energy every single time. Now imagine every 90 minutes, there is more solar energy falls on planet Earth than we use in the whole year. It's simply a matter of converting the solar energy into a useful form of the energy. It's a matter of that conversion, and one day that will happen. And when that happens, the energy will become the next air. It will become abundant and it will become free. It is no different if you go back and look at 200 years ago. The rarest element, rarest metal on planet Earth was aluminium. It was so rare, people thought it was, it was the most precious metal. So when the king Napoleon hosted the king of Siam, he fed them on a platter with aluminium to show him that he is rich, right? And he fed all his generals with gold platter, all his troops with a silver platter. But the king of Siam was fed in the aluminium platter because it was so expensive. Even though there was more aluminium on earth than ever, but it was in the form of bauxite. It was very, very hard to convert to take out the aluminium out of bauxite. And the technology called electrolysis came about. And once the electrolysis happened, we were able to extract aluminium really easily. And now it is so cheap that we throw it away. Now imagine what is going to be the electrolysis of the solar. And once that happens, suddenly the energy will become so abundant, it will become free. And when you have free energy, you can have free clean water because you can desalinize the water. You can distill the water, and you can have the dirtiest places in the water. You can have a clean, fresh water, and that will get rid of all the waterborne diseases. So my point is, this book is all about how do you create this mindset of abundance from minds and get rid of the mindset of scarcity. This idea of uh, conservation or sustainability become about conservation. People talk about we need to create a sustainable planet, and what they really mean is conserve. That means use less of what we have, instead of showing that best way to create a sustainability is to create more of what you need rather than use less. Because you can't say, hey, breathe every 30 seconds, because you need to really conserve air. And now there are more people, you need to breathe every minute, and then sooner or later you're going to say you can't breathe anymore because there's so many people. Instead, let's find a way to create more oxygen. Let's find a way to create more energy. Let's find a way to create more of what we need so we can all live in this world of abundance. And that's what this is about, the thought process you go through to change your mindset from what is possible to what actually you can do.
Yes, sir. The next question is, what tricks or methods do you use which keeps you focused during your day-to-day busy schedule?
Yeah. So in terms of looking at the habits, they're very, very different, right? So in a sense, what works for me is not necessarily is going to work for you. So I think when people ask other people, hey, you have been very successful, can you tell me what are your habits? To me, that actually is not a great question, because to be like them, it's not to follow their habits, but to actually follow their mindset, how they think, right? So you, all of you probably know about Tony Robbins. Tony actually is one of the greatest motivational speaker, and he takes ice bath every single morning. Now you can take an ice bath 3 times a day. You're not going to become Tony Robbins because you took ice bath. You become like him by actually thinking like him, not behaving like him. Now, to answer your question specifically, what keeps me focused always is knowing what my North Star is, knowing what my purpose in life is. Every day I wake up and saying, everything am I doing today, am I moving towards that purpose or not? And so to me, what keeps me focused is that, is this thing that I'm doing, is it somehow taking me towards that purpose that I set out to do? So I look at my life and saying, God has been very kind to us. As most of you know, I grew up in India. We were very, very poor. There are times we didn't have food to eat. There were times we had no place to stay. And I came to United States with $5 in my pocket and absolutely couldn't speak English, right? And God has been just absolutely kind to us. And with that kindness, my goal in life is to see how many more people can I positively improve their lives, how many people I can impact their lives positively. How can I give the message of hope? How can we go people to start taking actions today, so not only they can get out of the cycle of poverty, but start to contribute more towards the benefit of humanity? Because the more people's problem you solve, the the richer you become, and richer you become not just financially, but spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually. So to me, constantly intellectual curiosity is what drives me. So I'm always learning every day. Even though when I started Viome, I have no degree in biology, I have no degree in science. When I started Moon Express, I have never actually even understood what the astronomy is, what these orbital circuits are. I have no degree in computer science. I have no degree in fact, any science, right? But I started a computer company. I started the commerce company. I started the space company. I started the healthcare company. It's because I was always curious to what can be done. And when I look at anything, I read a lot. I'm just a reader. So when I read, I don't read one book on any subject. And the reason is when you read a book on a subject, the author's view becomes your view. When you read 20 books on a subject, then you take the views from 20 different people, you synthesize them in your own way, you connect the dots that have never been connected, and you create a view which is your view, which is really what changes everything else. So to me, remaining intellectually curious, reading a lot, and the best way to know where the world is headed is not to have a crystal ball, but actually read the research that's coming out today. Because what's coming out in the academic labs today is what is going to be the future in 5 years. So I read every Nature magazine, every Cell magazine, everything that is going out in the world. I read lots and lots of science paper, and that allows me to see what are the things starting to see traction here is going to come out as a product in 4 to 5 years. And that's how I focus on what's the next big problem I can solve using the technology that is coming out now.
So the next question is, we have always been told that an apple keeps a doctor away. So is this true that if one is comfortable with apple, then everyone will be able to digest that thing?
Now, the answer is absolutely wrong. In fact, as I mentioned before, there is no such thing as one healthy food. There is no magical elixir that you can take and somehow you're going to have a long life. Yeah. So this idea of apple is good for you, in fact, is actually wrong. Apple is good for some people some of the time, and it is bad for people some of the time, right? So it really depends on what is happening in your body. So if you have a virus that is being fed with apple, the last thing you want to do is actually eat apple. If you have certain compounds in the apple that are going to be harmed, so for example, if you have a SIBO and apple has fiber, then the last thing you want to do is to actually eat apple. So in fact, even the things like curcumin, it's good some of the time and it's bad other times. Same type of thing, NAD, which is a precursor to NAD, like NMN, which increases the mitochondrial biogenesis. That is good for longevity, but can also reduce your longevity if you have high cellular senescence, or if you have a high inflammation, right? So it really is not one single food that's good for everyone, or it's not one single food, even though if it's good for you today, not necessarily is going to be good for you tomorrow. So always look at what is happening. And technologies are now coming along. I mean, Viome is the first implementation. But guess what? In the future, you won't need Viome, because you're going to have the nanobots inside your body constantly analyzing your body. Your smart toilets are going to be analyzing your stool and urine. Your mirror is going to be analyzing you, scanning your body all the time. Your tiles in your floor are going to be analyzing your sweat, going to be analyzing your stuff. Your Alexa is going to be analyzing your voice to know if you're depressed or not, when you're sick or not. How you walk is going to be measured. And all of those information is going to be collected together with your AI agent, and is going to actually figure out what is going on, and is going to go back and actually order the right food for you in your fridge and throw away all the stuff that you don't need to eat. And it will instruct your microwave and oven to be able to start cooking the food in a way that is best for you. So all of the things someday is going to become artificial intelligence control, and your life is going to get easier and easier. So the fact is, today we do these things like Viome, but those will become unnecessary in a decade from now, because everything in your body is going to be constantly analyzed all of the time, and is going to actually give you the actionable information all of the time.
Yes, sir. The next question is, how can we change the way in which education is being given to us?
Uh, well, first thing is, this is what's happening right now. The fact is, the education was designed to teach people skills. And that was really good in the times when we were living in the industrial era. That means you could learn about accounting, you could learn about industrial engineering, you can learn about machines, and all those were good, that you could learn a skill and you can use it for the rest of your life. In the world we live today, this world of exponential technologies, everything that we learn becomes obsolete by the time we graduate. So we have to rethink and reimagine education. And it is going to be about learning to learn, learning to solve problems. And most problems tend to be multidisciplinary rather than single disciplinary. So, really having a broad knowledge of many subjects, learning to connect the dots, learning to solve problems will become more important. And anyone who is interested in this subject, I've written a couple of articles on Forbes around that. So just Google Naveen Jain Forbes education, and you will find why is education ripe for disruption and how to create education system for the next century. And I think you'll start to see my thought process of what will take for us to recreate education system. And this is what we are doing right now is an education, right? The fact that we are able to talk about subjects which have nothing to do with the skills that you'll be learning as a subject matter. This is about lifelong learning. How do you go out and continue to maintain curiosity? So watch the TED Talks. I mean, I can tell you that three of our children, who are probably most of them are your age or much older than you, when they were young, I mean, two of them went to Stanford, one went to Wharton, and we always told them that learning is lifelong. Watch TED Talk. Try to create the dots that have never been created. Go to YouTube and look at the videos from Singularity University, looking at all of these technologies. And people may think, well, I am not interested in science and technology, then why do I care about that? Well, the problem is the science and technology becomes the tools to do for you to do what you want. It's not a destination in itself. The science and technology is being merged into our life. You look at the dishwasher, you look at a washing machine, they are the robots. They are AI-driven robots that you use today, but we call them dishwasher and we call them washing machine. But they are literally the things that someday were considered very, very sci-fi stuff. Right. So I think the technology is going to merge with the human life. And without knowing about technology, you can't really improve people's lives.
Yes, sir. The next question is, are there any chances of finding petroleum on moon? If yes, will it be practical to bring petroleum to Earth using spacecraft because rockets use so much of fuel?
Well, first of all, it's a wrong question to be asking, because why do we even need the rocket fuel or petroleum? And that is a fundamental belief is wrong, because you can use helium-3, which is an isotope of helium that can be used for fusion energy, and a small amount of helium-3 could power this planet for decades, right? So you have to start thinking about, can we use hydrogen, which is H2O, the H2 of the H2O, can we use the hydrogen as a fuel? Can we use the nuclear as a fuel? Can we use the microwave as a fuel? Can we use the radiation as a fuel? So idea is to not to redo what we do now, but to rethink what can be done. And there is absolutely no reason we can't build the nuclear powered rockets, and they require absolutely zero fuel. And as a matter of fact, if you start to think about, do we even need all the fuel that we take from planet Earth? What if we can use a different fuel? And after that, we can actually have these fuel pumps along the way. That means you can have a hydrogen fuel that you can extract from water on the moon and put them in the lunar orbit. So when you're going to the Mars, you can refuel yourself and then continue your journey. And as you go along, there are fuel depots all around that you can keep refueling yourself. So I really think idea is not to be able to use platinum, because I think, in fact, I would say even on planet Earth, the use of petroleum is going to go away. In fact, more and more car companies are now promising to have electric vehicles without ever using any fossil fuel. GM just announced that by 2050, they're going to have absolutely no petroleum-based cars. So I really think the world is going to change when we're going to have an autonomous electric vehicles, or autonomous vehicles that don't use any fossil fuel. They don't have to be electric. They can be solar. I mean, there can be n number of other possible mechanisms. They could use hydrogen fuel. They can use only other types of fuel that could actually power these motor vehicles.
So the next question is, what are your thoughts on agile process of starting a business or a startup?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. You broke up for a second.
What are your thoughts on agile process for starting
Okay.
a business or a startup?
Well, the agile process really is about failing fast. And to me, the startup is not about creating a business. A startup is about experimenting to figure out what business are you in, right? And this is, by the way, the lesson I learned from my daughter. She started her new company on a women's health. And I was just asking her 2 weeks ago, and I say, how is your business coming along? And she looks at me and said, Dad, you know nothing about entrepreneurship, do you? It's like, wow, I've done this so many times. What do you mean I don't know anything about entrepreneurship? He said, Dad, the job of an entrepreneur is not to build a business. The job of an entrepreneur is to first figure out can we do enough of these experiments to figure out if there is a business here. Once I have done the experiment, then I'll tell you that this is my business, and then I'll tell you how my business is doing. Right now, I'm still on the first phase to figure out, what are the possibilities that I can go out for, and which of them is going to become a big business. So to me, as an agile process really is about failing fast. That means how quickly can you do an experiment that will tell you is it going to work or not work. And I think if you look at a Google X and my buddy Astro Teller, he will always tell you that they reward people for actually finding the fastest possible way to say this will not work. Every experiment you do, you have to say, outcome of this experiment, what will I change if this experiment is successful or fail? What will be my next action, right? That means don't do an experiment that does not result in coming up with the next action that is going to be a different action. If you're going to do the next thing anyway, then don't bother doing the experiment that you're doing right now.
So the next question is, with technologies becoming more personalized, is it for the better or for a little bit dangerous for us?
Well, the technology in itself is neither dangerous or nor beneficial. What we do with it can be beneficial or not, right? So you can use a hammer to build a house that will protect the people from all types of natural disasters. And you can use a hammer to kill someone. You can use a car to go to work where you actually are able to contribute to the society, or you can use a car to kill someone, right? So it is not the technology in itself that is good or bad. What we do with it can be good or bad. You look at the messenger RNA, like, the mRNA today is being used to protect the humanity against coronavirus. But that means we can build the mRNA as a vaccine to protect ourselves. And the same mRNA can be used for biological warfare. That means if we can inhale this mRNA, you could destroy the whole humanity. So it's not that mRNA technology in itself is good or bad. It is what humans do with that could be good or bad. So I really feel that technology is pretty neutral, and what we do with it can actually be what it is.
Yes. So the next question is, so many people are focusing on startup, and startup is kind of becoming a trend, and some people pursue startup without any idea, and so many startups fail due to this reason. So what are your views on this thing, and what will be your words on the same?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Krishna. Startups never fail because they don't have an idea. Startups fail because they have too many ideas, right? So most companies die from indigestion rather than starvation. People are always constantly have so many ideas is what kills the startup, rather than having a singular focus and then seeing what is not working and constantly pivoting and adapting to what is not working. And to me, ideas are dime a dozen. What really makes a startup successful is a flawless execution, not the breakthrough innovation, right? So it's not about the ideas. Everybody has ideas, right? So if you can go to a rickshaw driver, he will give you an idea, right? So everyone has an idea, but the entrepreneurs actually go out and take action to go do something about it. As a startup, your goal should be to know what is your larger purpose. And again, going back to what I started with, knowing why this, why now, why me. That means, would this problem is this problem worth solving? Would it help a billion people? Why now? Is the time now? Do we have the right set of technology that will allow me to solve this problem now? And why me? What question am I asking that is different from what everyone else is asking? And that's why I will be the best person to solve this problem. That means I am thinking about it differently. So to me, very rarely the companies fail from the lack of ideas. They fail from executing poorly. And even if you never have to be first to market, this idea that we learn in the MBA school that you have to be first to market is wrong. In fact, if you look at most successful companies, they have never been first to market. Facebook was not the first social network. In fact, it wasn't even before there was MySpace, and MySpace wasn't the first to the social network. Before there was Friendster. So if you go back and look at these things, were not the companies that are successful today. Google was not the first search engine, and before there, I mean, you can go back. There were Inktomi, there were Yahoo, there were Lycos, and there were Infosys, and you can go on and on and on. The many search engines came about. People may not remember Alta Vista. I mean, that was one of the great search engines of its time. So the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to be the first to market. You don't have to have a great idea. You have to have a breakthrough execution. That means you do it better than anyone else. It's blocking and tackling.
Sir, the next question is, you made so many businesses. So how do you keep going yourself through that thing? Like so many people become satisfied with one business and one startup. So what was that thing that keep you hunger during this process?
Well, depending on why you start a company, to me, I am obviously now 61, and I started my last company when I was in late 50s, and people thought it was time to retire. To me, I could do another 10 companies before I actually call it a day. The reason is I don't start companies to make money, because if you start the company simply to make money, you're very likely to fail. So you start a company because you believe God has given you a gift that you can contribute back. That means if I don't go out and solve this problem for healthcare for our children and our society and our fellow humans, then who will? And after I solve healthcare, it's not that the world is going to be in lack of problems. We still got agriculture to be solved. We still need education. We still need to solve, the problems of energy. But even if we solve all of those problems, guess what? There'll be a new set of problems. So, for example, today, most people may not remember in the olden days of my time, when you need to go to the internet, you had to dial through a modem and you will dial into an internet, and there was very slow connection that you would get to be able to get to the internet. And today we do the same thing. To convey my thoughts to you, I'm using this slow bandwidth connection called speech, right? So when I'm speaking, my mind can think 10 times faster than I can speak, but I'm still using this low bandwidth communication to talk to you. What if we can connect our brains to all of the people who are here, and you can instantly download the thoughts, my thoughts, into your brain? Now, you don't have to spend 4 years in a college to learn. You can upload all of the professor's brain in your brain. You can subscribe to their brain, so as they learn something new, you actually get updated, and suddenly your neocortex, your brain, is going to get connected to the cloud, and you can have unlimited bandwidth, unlimited memory, unlimited amount of knowledge that you can accumulate. And when you do that, there'll be a new set of problems that will create, and then now you're going to go out and start solving the problem. So we as humanity are never going to run out of problems to solve. It's just that we have to keep thinking about what next problems that we're creating, that we have to start solving.
Yes, sir. The last question from our side will be that what will be your advice to the youth from the innovation point of view?
Well, I think the best thing, from an innovation point of view, is to constantly keep learning. You have to constantly be at the top of what is going on. Never give up the intellectual curiosity. The day you stop becoming curious is the day you actually die. So keep yourself alive, keep learning. Every day when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, am I better off intellectually today? Am I better off emotionally today? Am I better off spiritually today? And just keep the spirit of learning. And if you keep the spirit of learning, you'll never get too old. You're mute. Krishna, you're muted.
Sorry, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for this interactive session. We got to learn so many things from you, and thank you so much for the inspiration from your side and from your valuable time, obviously. And thank you so much who are present here and for your patience. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
sir.
very much. I really appreciate it. And good night, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much. Good
Good.
night.